Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddham dhammang sanghang namasami. Dear friends, for this afternoon, I'm going to disregard the schedule that we had published and sent out to you, and instead have a program that's more similar to our regular Sunday Sutta study program. So we'll try to wrap together the summation of this retreat by considering one of the longest and most unique and most important suttas that was given to us about the asavas, or the taints. We can start by taking 10 minutes for meditation together in silence. Taking an upright posture. Remembering our aspiration for clarity and wisdom, for peace and tranquility. And for freedom. Looking within at our own body and feelings, our own state of mind, to see ourselves just as we are in actuality. Aware of all the sensations arising anywhere in the body, and staying with that as we begin to calm down and settle in meditation, being present for the here and now. And if the breath is clear, letting awareness settle on the breath with the rise and fall of breath, and letting everything else fade away to the background, putting the breath in front. Nothing needs to be done except awareness of the rise and fall of the breath. The sutta that I want to present is called Sabhasava, All the Taints. It's number 2 in the middle length discourses. I'm not going to follow the procedure of putting the sutta up on the screen and reading all of it through. Instead, I'm going to be summarizing and paraphrasing. And I would like to stop from time to time. So if you have a question along the way or a comment along the way, you may put your hand up or type something into the chat. And we'll have a few breaks from my talking in order to have a conversation. Now, earlier on this morning, I was trying to communicate the idea that the process of decreasing and abandoning of the taints, preventing them from arising and growing, is a kind of a unifying principle that everything that we do with our morality, our lifestyle, our deportment can be measured as to how it works in reducing the taints, reducing the asavas, removing the taint of sensuality, or could say greed and excitement arising from contacts with the 5 senses, removing the asava of becoming, or the asava of existence, which can involve becoming too obsessed with the future existence that we want, whether we want to be in heaven or we want to become something within this lifetime. That kind of obsession and all kind of obsessions related to our status, our position in the world, our position in the cosmology, all of that, those are acquisitions. Can we let go of them? And then the third of all is the asava of ignorance, the taint of non-knowing, which I am suggesting is especially the deluded or unbalanced ways of thinking about things, those concepts that instead of helping us to become wise and see clearly, instead are putting up a screen that distorts our ability to know things truly as they are. So this could be like another thing that I mentioned earlier on in the sutta is that the Dhamma that the Buddha taught, with all the many aspects and elements, is like a jewel with many facets. And if one finds one facet or one aspect of the practice that you're able to do and able to get a hold of, you could just work that one, and that would lead you through and lead you to connect with the others, because all of the parts of the teaching are beautifully interconnected. So it could be that if you memorize the asava, that you find that it connects to everything else. So here comes the sutta. The Buddha was living in Savatthi in Jeta's Grove in Anathapindika's Park. This is where a great many of the sutras were given. It was a wonderful place. It was wealthy and comfortable and pious and virtuous. The ruler was virtuous. It was sort of something like heaven and earth. So it was in some ways an ideal space for practice. And without any preamble or any kind of situation, the Buddha just came in front of his Sangha and said, I will teach you the discourse for the restraint of all the taints. Listen closely. Now, the preamble, the destruction of the taints is one for one who knows and sees, not for one who does not know and see. One who knows and sees what? Wise attention and unwise attention. When one attends unwisely, unarisen taints arise, and arisen taints increase. When one attends wisely, unarisen taints do not arise, and the arisen taints are abandoned. This can be referring to something that's called in the Pali language vepulasa, or distortions of seeing. So if you look at what is impermanent and you think it's permanent, that's a distortion. And how much agitation and upset is caused when we don't recognize and see the impermanence. When we look at something which is unattractive and we think it's beautiful, it's another one of the distortions. This could relate to the human body. So people can be obsessed with their fitness, their good health, their makeup, their attire, and their appearance in the sense of being beautiful and attractive and perfect. Or one could look at, especially like a young person, and young people sometimes have got such perfect appearing bodies. And if you just see that, then you could have a distortion of the way of seeing. But if you see the body throughout the course of life, you would notice the body getting old, developing wrinkles, developing age spots. I'm tempted to show you all the ugly things in my body, but and then developing disease, and how, you know, in the old days before they had medicine, disease was like so disgusting. Somebody who was like on their deathbed and their terminal disease, it could be that, you know, they're coughing up black goop, and their breath smells terrible because of the disease that's going on, that their insides are being eaten up with disease. And even after death, when we see the body that used to be so lovable, so dear, is decomposing. So then the right way of seeing it is not to despise what's beautiful in attraction and the perfection of youth, but to see in a balanced way, to see things accurately how they are. And then the last distortion of the view is taking what is not myself, not my property, not owned by me, not controlled by me, and taking this as being myself. So much agitation from identification about unwise identification with things. And if we could just remember, it's impersonal. It's impersonal. And so then that's the wise attention. Then he gives 7 ways that taints can be abandoned. And I'll go through them. The first is called the taints to be abandoned by seeing. This has to do with the first step of the Noble Eightfold Path, the right view, how to see. We talked about this earlier. the way it's described in this sutta is in terms of what things are fit for attention and what things are unfit for attention. If you attend unwisely, focusing or obsessing about things that are not fit for attention, you might be thinking, was I in the past or was I not in the past? What was I in the past? How was I in the past? Having been what? Did I become something in the past? Or shall I be in the future? Shall I not be in the future? What shall I be in the future? How shall I be in the future? Having been what? What will I become in the future? And so, or else a person is inwardly perplexed about the present. And they're thinking, am I? Am I not? What am I? How am I? Where has this being come from? Where will it go? So this is partly in the realm of like philosophy questions where different thinkers would get together and debate with each other and in questions like this, but actually sort of like abstract or intellectual thinking like that is coming from something that's much more from a felt sense, from something that's much more intuitive, emotional, or basic. So if you think that your life is, or yourself is eternal, but there's this shadow of doubt that's saying, well, you're going to die someday. That's like the basic kind of anxiety. And you could say that all of this speculation about the nature of the self is all dancing around the same deep underlying, what some people call this existential anxiety. We want to exist, but we're not sure if we can. You know, if a baby or a child or a person of any age is seen and acknowledged and recognized, it could be possible for them to have a balanced, functional sense of identity that's comfortable, that doesn't involve a lot of clinging and anxiety or even a lot of speculation. It's just having a practical relationship with the person in the mirror. You're able to make decisions, you're able to stand on your own and so forth. And all of that is okay. A person who is not seen, who's ignored or who's despised, who's looked down to, or who's discounted in a lot of different ways, that could like really strongly exacerbate and intensify that kind of anxiety about existence. So that existential anxiety could like spin up to being a crisis. So it's a combination of a psychological thing and also a philosophy question, both of them together. So instead of attending in that way, the Buddha recommends a completely different way of attending, which is to attend wisely. They would say, this is suffering. They attend wisely. This is the origin of suffering. This is the cessation of suffering. This is the way leading to the cessation of suffering. And within this structure, this is what we spoke about earlier, the Buddha's right view in the sense of being an invitation to come and see. Can you, without fear, notice your own suffering and kind of relax about it and notice it for it's the way it is, so it's painful, or noticing the suffering of others, and without getting all anxious and disturbed and saying, I have to fix it right away, just say, oh, that's painful. And then finding out, this is the hypothesis you can discover. Can I see where there's the clinging and identification or the craving that's the cause of the suffering that makes me reject what's real and want something different? And then when I release that, can I see the suffering drop away? So in effect, the wise attention is not this speculation about who am I or who will I be, but instead kind of like a path of practice, which is especially focused on clinging, craving, and identification, and how those things can either be picked up to increase our suffering or let go to decrease the suffering. So that's the first taint, the first way to abandon the taint. Then the next one is the taint to be abandoned by restraining. Is there a question? Okay. The taint to be abandoned by restraining. Here, bhikkhus, reflecting wisely, one abides with the eye faculty restrained. It says that taints, vexation, and fever can arise in one who abides with the eye faculty unrestrained. And then the same thing for the ear, the nose, the tongue, the body, and the mind. So in this case, when there's a contact through any of the senses, we've learned that depending on our underlying tendencies or how we've been conditioned, the very next thing that arises is a vedana, or a feeling. And again, depending on the conditions, what we've been training ourselves for, from that feeling is arising perceptions. So if I get a painful feeling, this is the unrestrained eye faculty, I get an unpleasant feeling seeing my enemy, and then comes along the perception that so-and-so always does that to me. And then spinning around from that comes a lot of proliferations of thoughts that is generating even more unpleasant feelings and more biased and foolish perceptions about that, and bad intentions, followed by remorse, and it just goes on. So all of these can arise by not being restrained with the faculties. Now, it is true that one can choose like what to look at. And this sutta is given in the context of a group of monastics who are doing monastic training. You may choose to adapt this for yourself in your life as a householder. So as a monastic, when we go to the village, we're not supposed to have what they call monkey eyes, which means we look over there, look up here, look over here, or look at that, what's in the shop window, look at those people, and so on like that. And instead, the training is that we would be looking downwards towards the ground, keeping our eyes one plow's length in front of us, and actually not looking around in order to avoid the extra stimulation and challenge to our bad tendencies. So we're giving a kind of like a protected zone where there's not so many chances for bad tendencies to get triggered. You may choose to take your watching the news and put on a budget and say, that you're only going to look at the news for 5 minutes a day maximum or something like that. Or you could choose to avoid like too much advertising or too much putting yourselves in circumstances that are giving a lot of challenge like that. The other alternative to that is to do the preconditioning. So it's not that you have to poke out your eyes and block your ears and cover your nose so that you don't receive any sense impressions. Instead, it's like what the tendencies are. If you like, you could just precondition the mind by focusing on the second step of the Noble Eightfold Path, developing the thought of generosity, the thought of loving kindness, and the thought of compassion. Or you could say the thought of renunciation, of greed, the thought of renunciation of hatred, and renunciation without greed, without hatred, and without cruelty. And so then, if you condition yourself like that, say if you're doing a regular meditation in the morning and you practice that meditation to just plant those habits of thought, even if you're going to have a conversation with somebody, before the conversation, you could do that contemplation and plant in yourself the thought of generosity, kindness, and compassion towards that person. And then that conditioning means that it's much less likely that the afflictive things will get triggered when you have those sense contacts. So that's the abandoning by restraining. Then comes the taints to be abandoned by using. This also we discussed earlier on in the retreat. We were talking about how the sensual pleasure and greed that we have for pretty things or delightful things is actually probably through evolution. There's got a relationship that the things that are good for us, that are good for our survival, seem to be like kind of like tasty and yummy. And so the mind inclines towards those things. And it may be possible that our early forebears in maybe 3,000 or 4,000 years ago, they didn't have so much opportunity to get that much meat, or they didn't have a chance to get that much sugar. And so any opportunity for a bit of meat or a bit of sugar would, because if it's something that you get once in a while, it's like super good for you, good for your survival. And so like those are really attractive. But nowadays, it's like every day is Christmas in terms of the amount of food that we have available to us. And those tendencies that we got many thousand of years ago would be no longer for our benefit. So you want to be very cautious about those pleasant feelings about being attracted and drawn towards the things that are that seem lovely to us, and also be very cautious about the things that seem disgusting that we want to, get rid of and be repelled by, because it could be that the loving thing is actually bad for us, and it could be that something that's bitter or disgusting, well, that might be a medicine that actually would be good for us if we accept it. So not reacting from the point of sensuality, but instead reacting from a more considered idea of what is useful and beneficial. So we use the robe for protection from cold and heat, and from mosquitoes, from sunburn, and from creeping insects. And we use the robe to protect our modesty. We use the food not for fun or intoxication or to become beautiful, but for having the strength to continue with our life, the holy life, the life of endeavor. to continue for another day, to avoid discomfort, to assist in the holy life, and to think about terminating the racking feeling of hunger, which could be a distraction, without undertaking any new feelings from overeating or greed. And likewise with the resting place, the lodgings, those are just for protection, warding off the perils of the climate and the weather, and also for enjoying being secluded on retreat. And the medicine is only for protection from those afflictions that result from sickness and for the benefit of good health. So you may consider the things that you need to use in your balanced way, following the middle path, not completely impoverishing yourself, and not seeking to accumulate more and more wealth, but instead something in the middle. They say that for a layperson, even actually a layperson can accumulate wealth if they do so by virtuous means, and then if they use that wealth in a way which is generous, and they're fair and generous towards their employees, they're generous towards their family, they're generous towards the spiritual seekers or those who are following the mendicant path. The Buddha, there's one story of a layman who was a miser, and he would never share anything with anybody. He didn't like to have anybody, he liked to eat by himself at the top of a 7-story tower, because he didn't want anybody to see him eating, because they might ask for some food. You know, it's sort of like an amusing story, but the gist of it is that the Buddha criticized that extreme miserliness. So what happened to a monk, by their psychic powers, rose up in the air and came to the window with their alms bowl, looking for some alms food. And with a great hesitation, the miserly man said, okay, we'll give him a little something. And I think his wife gave something to the monk, and then the amount of food doubled. And every time she gave something to the monk, the food kept doubling and doubling and doubling until he was like, the whole room was completely filled with food. And it shows that, like, this is the Buddhist version of the, there's something like a prosperity gospel. So this is the prosperity gospel of Buddhism, that by being generous, then like what goes around comes around, and the wealth comes back to you. But the things that we need to use, it's not the purpose. Avoiding sensuality doesn't mean that we starve ourselves, or that we torture ourselves. We can have the middle way on that. But we should do this reflection regularly to condition the mind about what's really needed, what's really beneficial, what's really useful, to have a considered approach to that. The next one is the taints to be abandoned by enduring. Cold and heat, hunger and thirst, contact with gadflies, mosquitoes, wind and sun, and creeping things, enduring ill-spoken, unwelcome words, enduring arisen bodily feelings that are painful, racking, sharp, piercing, disagreeable, distressing, and menacing to life. So in this lesson, it's maybe the opposite of seeing the delightful in something that's actually ugly, in something Okay, and something that seems to be delightful, we can see the unattractive qualities. In something that seems to be unattractive, we can see there's like a kind of a silver lining with those things. Number one, they're impermanent, they won't last forever. Number two, it's an opportunity for renunciation. If I've developed a mind which has this quality of patience and equanimity, I'm able to be contented with external reality, whatever is presented to us, and just accepting reality on its own terms as it is. Not meaning that we agree with something that's morally bad, but the things that are the inevitable pains and disturbances of life. If we've got this equanimous mind that a disturbance is coming up, but we don't take on the disturbance. Years ago, when I was first encountering Buddhism, I had a job that was partly involved with customer service with people in connection with their medical insurance. And so that would involve people being worried about their bodies, their health, and their money. Three of the most emotional things that can cause people to be triggered. And because of just getting a little bit of this training, instead of like reacting and picking up their distress and disturbance and defending the program against the criticism, instead I found it just kind of came naturally just to listen. And then if it wasn't really clear what they were on about or what their problem was, asking more questions to really understand and giving feedback to them to show that I was hearing and understanding what the concern, what the complaint was. And then sort of like coming to the conclusion is, okay, so how can I help? How can we help with this? And so it's because of not picking up the disturbance for criticism. And the people who knew me at the time were kind of saying, what happened to you? Yeah, you're nice. The idea of having, besides patience or equanimity, the practice of loving kindness is also precious in this case, so that if our enemies are cutting our limbs off with a hacksaw, if we're able to continue keeping the mind of loving kindness towards them and not falling into anger towards them, then that protects our sanity and keeps alive in us the possibility to not lose what we've gained in terms of our spiritual gains. But then the next taint is the one that's sort of like these two go together. The next one is the taints to be abandoned by avoiding. You should avoid a wild elephant, a wild horse, a wild bull, a wild dog, a snake, a stump, a bramble, a chasm, a cliff, a cesspit, and a sewer. You avoid sitting on unsuitable seats, wandering to unsuitable resorts, and associating with bad friends. So the reason I say this is a companion to the other one, is it could be that there is a circumstance which is painful and difficult. And depending on how far along you are in your training, you can manage with it and really hold your equanimity and not be so disturbed that it goes beyond what's fruitful. But if, based on how far along you are in your training, being subjected to those stresses causes you to be overwhelmed by reactions and then to fall into some unwholesome, negative, angry or hateful or greedy states of mind, such that then it's a lot of trouble to dig yourself out of that. And then doing that again and again, if you're, say, in a job or in a family situation where there's something going on in the workplace or something going on in the family that's actually unwholesome, it can be like there's a grieving process of saying, oh, this is sad, this is painful. But then it keeps happening over and over again. So then the grieving is never able to be over. And then a person can become set back because of that. So if the circumstance is too much, you could consider leaving that circumstance in order to regain your stability. And when you've come to a point of your own psychological or mental wellness and health, then don't just completely run away from that painful situation, but perhaps to be able to circle back to it with the intention of reconciliation and forgiveness, to close the circle and not leave some like a festering wound that you just swept under the rug by getting away from a situation. So an unsuitable seat or an unsuitable resort also sort of has to do with our precepts of morality. If somebody is a monastic, they have specific training. They're not supposed to sit on a high and luxurious seat or bed, because that could trigger a reaction of sensuous greed. And they're not supposed to, when they go in the alms round, they're not supposed to go into a house and just sit down without being invited. And they're not supposed to go into the bedroom and sit down there. So these are circumstances that could cause criticism and ill repute for a monastic that creates a disturbance, like a social disturbance. And another aspect of it, we have a saying, this is about associating with bad friends. Not to associate with fools is considered a blessing supreme. Okay. So if I was invited to give a Dhamma talk in prison, and there's a good chance that a lot of the prisoners are pretty foolish. So should I refuse to give that talk because of not associating with fools? No, I don't have to refuse that. By associating, that means associating with fools and letting the fools be the leader. So if I go into a situation with people who don't have wisdom, they haven't learned anything, they haven't thought about anything, and then I just sort of like go along with their mentality. That's what associating with fools, and that would be something that is to be avoided. So far, the taints that we've talked about are kind of in the realm of morality and deportment, and the next two that are coming up are in the realm of meditation and mental cultivation. So I think I'd like to pause here and see whether there's any questions or comments, or if anybody can see how this sutta relates to everything else we were talking about during this retreat, because it's a really different approach to most of the other suttas that we see about it. Most of the other suttas are talking about deep meditation and realization of the truth, and this profound, deep psychological work. And this sutta is talking about a lot of tricks or techniques or ways of holding ourselves or ways of behaving that are, kind of simple, but we can use them to prevent unarisen taints from arising and to cause the arisen ones to go away. And if you don't have a question, I would appreciate if you would give me an example of how you actually are already doing this, and you are already finding that you can avoid the taints from arising, or you can cause the taints to be disappeared. Are you going to see? Yes, please. I'm going to invite Satyamata to come up. You have to, you don't have to come to the camera, but you have to take the mic.
Thank you, Ayya. I just found that when someone asks if I need something, in my monastic life, a requisite or something, and they ask for a link, to the item, that involves going online, like kind of shopping. And I found that avoiding that has been very beneficial to the mind, guarding the mind, protecting the mind from that tendency to sort of look at this and look at that, or you've got to find something, you've got to search through many of those items to know which one. So I noticed that stimulates the mind in a very unwholesome way. So I've sort of made a determination to not do any more online shopping and no more links.
Ren.
Thank you, Ayya. I've been taking careful notes, and I find this session also very informative and useful. Thank you. And I don't know if I'm seeing it correctly or if I'm interpreting it correctly, but the way I see it, there's like having a lay life, there's this tension between being neutral and seeing the way as it is and accepting how it is. There's certain kind of gentle neutrality about that, versus sometimes in lay life, there's something, life needs to happen and certain kind of passion needs to be instilled. I kind of see it as potential that, and maybe with more practice, I could be better. But right now I am where I am. So I kind of see this meditation practice kind of like a grinding of the coarser quality of existence, in kind of maybe sometimes in the background, but it's always grinding. The more I meditate, the more it's grinding into a finer level. And so then when there's that level reached, then my action will reflect naturally. So what I feel like should be more passionate becomes not so important, perhaps, then it'll be more of that level. It's like grinding coffee to a finer quality. That's I'm kind of seeing it that way. I'm not sure if it's useful or true.
Yeah. I know before I come to Damon, I'm going to respond to this by recalling when they give a test to young school children, so with the marshmallows, like, are they able to wait 5 minutes before eating the marshmallow? And those children who've got the ability to wait, they've learned some tricks, like how to distract themselves. Like they may sing a song or something, or they may look the other way or something to stop themselves from taking the Not the mushroom, taking the marshmallow. Um, or the mushroom. And so the children who have the agency over themselves, that they got the power to choose what they're going to do. They're not like a puppet to temptation. Those children are so much happier than the children who are unable to resist temptation. And a long time later, they test them as adults and they find that the ones who, have got the ability to make those choices are happier. And so a lot of this training is in just these simple and common sense ways, saying, like, like where your happiness lies. I can't tell you about your happiness. You know it for yourself. And if you, it's like a combination of not just what's in your heart without regard to the Dhamma, but you take what's in the Dhamma and you see how that's experienced within yourself, and you can learn about where your happiness is. And when you become sensitive to that, then when you discover that you got the power, then that is a different kind of well-being. And I think that's what's being directed to at the first part. Now Damon had a hand up, but no, is he still around?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Thank you, Ayya. This is to me, very practical, as you say, common sense sutra. It reminds me of the book of Proverbs, where each one kind of starts off, better to do this than to do something else. And the one that always stays in my mind is better to live on the corner of the roof than in the house with a quarrelsome wife. Of course, you could reverse the roles, but this type of thing about avoiding foolish friends, it reminds me very much of my upbringing, my Jewish upbringing in the Old Testament in the book of Proverbs. Thank you.
Great, thank you. That's a wonderful. And so the Buddhist teaching is not so far from many other cultures. We have that in common. And when we talk to people from different cultures or different spiritual paths, we can always be aware of what there is in common and be as affirming as possible towards the things that are held in common among the paths. Sheila.
Thank you, Ayya. This has been wonderful revelations. And this is the first home retreat online that I've done where we've had so much, quote, free meditation time to construct walking, taking a walk, or further sitting meditation. And so yesterday when I saw in the parentheses, take a walk. And that is the first time that on a home retreat that's structured, I've actually done that. I did that yesterday and today. And I turned my phone off on Friday. And generally when I take a walk, I take my phone and it's on. And I said, I'm going to take my phone, it's going to stay off, and I will only use it and have it for an emergency. And that was a way that I can continue to take my walks because I usually will have my phone, and if the phone rings, I'll answer it while I'm out walking. And so the learning is I can take my phone, I can turn it off during my walk, and only use it if there is an emergency. So that was a wonderful way to look at everyday taints and other ways of what I give attention to or what I need not to give attention to. Thank you.
Sadhu, 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 the system works. Yes, that's exactly what we're talking about. Little by little. Drop by drop, we fill the bucket full. Drop by drop, we purify the mind. Subhatra?
Yes. First of all, I like to once again, thank you, Ayya Sobhana, very much for a lot of things that you were teaching this weekend. I just want to share with other friends in this meeting that I've learned it in the past, right? But the thing is that it's because we have such habits, it's keep creeping back. And so I want to sort of lead back to the retreat yesterday and today, which talked about meditations. And long time ago, I shared like Damon's, I think, quest. Long time ago, I thought that, okay, in meditation, if I sit enough, I join enough, I will start seeing something that just like, it's a revelation, that it's like a vision. Some people think, you meditate, you see a vision, you keep waiting for that. But then I come to realize, and nowadays, that actually, at least for me and a lot of my Dhamma friends, meditation is really for knowing about self, or in other words, mindfulness. And that, why is that important? Is because I'm not seeing anything. I tell you, if that, not to disappoint you, but I'm not having a vision. But what I gain is the ability to have what's a Buddhist word called sati, which is being mindful in the moment, because there's enough practicing, so that at the time that things happen in life, right, suddenly I get so annoyed at somebody, and then I get angry, I get annoyed, starts wanting to say something bad or just to sting them or something. And in that moment, the ability to be able to be mindful that this is the defilement that's happening inside, and that saying something that hurts other people is against the third, right, of the 5 precepts. It's not good. It's really bad for them and for you. And all these things combined is the teachings that I can reach, by learning and listening in the moment, and stop myself from saying that and start thinking about, for example, non-self, that okay, that maybe they're directing it to me, but I'm not really me anyway, so let that voice goes. And the impermanence of the voice, all those teaching is coming from listening, coming from reading and studying, and not through meditation. This is my personal experience. But what meditation does is to help me be able to be mindful of what's happening inside me in an instant, a little bit more, a little bit more instantly, and able to apply the knowledge that I've learned from studying the Buddhist teaching.
Thank you very much. And I will say that there's a kind of a merger, isn't there, between the things that we hear in the teachings, the things that we've studied, the things that we've pondered about, and then with sati is a chance just to sit back and with the mind being very relaxed and open-minded, say, well, what's happening? What's really going on now? And to not so much be involved with saying it should be this way or it should be that way, but just saying, what is it? And then when we have the ability of mindfulness in that sense of being able to see what's actually going on with us, just as it is, without rejecting some things and favoring other things, but just saying, what is it? It's a combination. First, we do make an effort distinguishing what's skillful or not skillful. We make that effort, make that effort, make that effort. Then we got to sit back and say, okay, as a result of everything that I've been trying, what's it like now? And you can't be a good scientist unless you can look and see what is actually going on. And that looking and seeing reality as it truly is the precursor for the highest kind of wisdom. Because isn't that exactly what wisdom is that we can look and see things not through some kind of bias about how we think they should be, but we see them as they actually are, as they truly are. So I appreciate that comment, and I agree with you about mindfulness. Now I'm going to go back to the sutta and talk about the last 2 points, the last 2 ways of removing the taints, removing the asavas. This next one is kind of hardcore, and you might, this might be difficult to hear. What taints should be abandoned by removing? Here, a bhikkhu, reflecting wisely, does not tolerate an arisen thought of sensual desire. He abandons it, removes it, does away with it, and annihilates it. He does not tolerate an arisen thought of ill will. He abandons it, removes it, does away with it, and annihilates it. He does not tolerate an arisen thought of cruelty. He abandons it, removes it, does away with it, and annihilates it. He doesn't tolerate arisen evil, unwholesome states. He abandons them, removes them, does away with them, annihilates them. While taints, vexations, and fever arise in one who does not remove these thoughts, there are no taints, vexation, or fever in one who removes them. These are the taints to be abandoned by removing. There's something very similar given in the sixth step of the Noble Eightfold Path, which is about right effort. And that's the effort to prevent the unwholesome states from arising. If they do arise, to abandon them, to cause the wholesome states to arise. And then if they do arise, to nurture and protect them so that they grow and come to maturity. Elsewhere in the Anapanasati Sutta, that's a good example. It occurs in a lot of places. In the very last set of contemplations, they speak about doing the in-breath and the out-breath, experiencing the fading away of passion, which is sort of a stand-in for all of the unwholesome things, experiencing the cessation, experiencing renunciation, and experiencing the freedom or the non-arising. So when I was more of a beginner, I used to wonder, like, I thought you would renounce something when you have it, then you renounce it and you get rid of it. This is talking about that you got rid of it first and then you renounced it. So what's that about? Well, it happens sometimes during meditation that, like, you're not subjected to the pressure of the boss or the nagging wife or any of the other things that could stimulate unwholesome reactions. And then in that peaceful, protected, specialized environment, you can experience that those unwholesome tendencies have stopped, they've ceased, right? But have they ceased in a way such that they're not going to arouse again? Or have they ceased because it's just the low ebb of the roller coaster? So if it's a merry-go-round or a roller coaster, it comes and goes and comes and goes and comes and goes. And so then you have these moments where you forget to be angry, you forget to be sad, you temporarily, forget to be resentful. It's just not what's in your mind at a certain point of time. And then one can experience actually, if you have that momentary relief from the negative tendencies of the mind, it's like, wow, what a relief it is. Man, this is so blissful. It's so wonderful. I would really like to stay here. And possibly during retreat, you would be able to stay for a long time in that blissful state where you're just not engaging any of the negative aspects of the mind. But unless you have actually renounced them, they will come back again. When you go out and you encounter, a cop or somebody, runs over you in traffic or something happens, and then it all comes flooding back again. So those monks who are striving for the purification, every time they notice that something unwholesome is coming up, that's when they practice squashing it right there. So this is not a person who's like still really struggling and not able to control their negative mind states. When you're somebody who's more either under duress or more of a beginner, and they have a lot of negative states of mind and they're not yet able to control them, then at the beginning, you just got to, with a lot of self-compassion, saying it is what it is. These states arise from causes and conditions, and then, try to find a way to let them come down and soften, and find a way to abandon them. So you got to, learn how to abandon them. And there's a lot of work that happens in advance when you're not yet really able to having so much meditation power that you can, but eventually you could squash it so that it's done for good in this lifetime. And so this teaching is directed to somebody who has been making the effort for a while, has learned how to abandon. They may be abandoned the same negative pattern again and again, like 5,000 or 6,000 times or more than that. And then finally to say, I've had enough. I'm sick and tired of doing this over and over again. That's it, I'm finished. So this is what's meant by removing. And in the contemplation of the hindrances in the Satipatthana Sutta, they speak about seeing the hindrances arising, seeing them disappearing, and seeing them disappearing in such a way that they're not going to arise again. And so if you don't think you can do this, please raise your horizon a little bit higher. Look up and think, it's possible. You could do this. You have some bad habits that you had when you were younger that actually are completely gone. And so the bad habits that you have today could come to be completely gone as well. So that's the purpose of this, and it's associated with the step of right effort, which is part of the bhavana part of the Eightfold Path, or part of the meditation part of the Eightfold Path. And then I'm going to talk about the one more, and then we'll have a discussion about the meditation side. This is the taints to be abandoned by developing. And here, the bhikkhu, reflecting wisely, develops the mindfulness enlightenment factor, supported by seclusion, dispassion, cessation, and ripening in relinquishment. In effect, it's making the distinction between right mindfulness and wrong mindfulness. So the mindfulness of a burglar who's very mindfully on tiptoes breaking into a house is not the kind of mindfulness we're talking about, but the mindfulness with these other factors. Seclusion is symbolized by going to an empty hut, so going away from the busyness and distractions. And it also means being temporarily secluded from unwholesome factors during meditation. And then more and more, like continuously, being secluded from unwholesome factors because of how we cultivate the habits. And then finally, being secluded from any kind of grasping or picking up any kind of attachments or acquisitions in the mind. Dispassion, I mentioned that before, viraga. Raga is like that emotional reactivity. So the emotional reactivity is fades away. Cessation, that's the cessation of those unwholesome factors. And ripening in relinquishment, that's when you say, this negativity is gone and, oh, it's not coming back, right? So this theme, this is sort of like a refrain that goes with each of the enlightenment factors: seclusion, dispassion, cessation, ripening in relinquishment. And I know that some learners like to see it in writing, but I'm forcing you to just use your ears and try to take it in by heart as much as you can. And then later on, I suggest that you read this again, read it again and again, and memorize it and let it sink in. So that's the refrain. The factors are mindfulness, investigation of states, energy, rapture, tranquility, concentration, and equanimity. So mindfulness is, in this case, referring to an awareness of what's going on, which is able to discern the difference between the bright states and the dark states. Mindfulness at this point is not have to be involved with squashing the dark states and developing the bright states. It's just, all mindfulness does, it just sees it. See what's really there. Then the investigation of states in the Pali language, it's investigation of Dhammas. And it can refer to the states of mind. So just knowing what the mind is like. Is the mind filled with craving? Is the mind full of anger? Is the mind full of restlessness? Is the mind calm? Is the mind clear? Is the mind bright? Is the mind boundless, in the sense we're practicing the boundless loving kindness and the mind has become expanded and boundless? Those are the states to be investigated and known. I've heard it explained differently, actually, by Mandaji. Says you will hear the Dhamma that was taught by the Buddha, and you investigate the Dhamma that the Buddha taught, and then you find out, wow, this is really true. And so then you feel so delighted and happy with it, then energy arises. It's the next factor. So there's two different options. One is hearing the teachings and looking into them, not just being passive and sort of falling asleep while they blabber on about the teachings, but really engaging with them, and internalize them and integrate them and reflect on how these ideas are reverberating with your own innermost experience. And so that way you get to both the internal states and the Dhamma teachings are both being investigated. These are sequential, one leads to the other. So once you get that, then energy arises. That's making the right effort. So the classic for me is when I was clinging to something like, some resentment or something. And then for some reason, I dropped it. And sometimes it's so subtle, or like you don't exactly know why or how, but somehow you dropped it. And then you realize, oh, that piece of dukkha is gone. And it's so exciting. It's so satisfying to realize that this is possible, saying, oh, it's really true. This Dhamma really works. I looked and I saw, wow, I can see how it works. And then one becomes energized and wants to fully understand the Eightfold Path, fully understand the Dhamma's teachings, really put it into practice, really make the effort. And then if they do those things, then this PET is the strong spiritual joy that comes about during those times in meditation, that the negativities are not present and one can experience the mind being so bright, clear, having energy, but also being completely stable because there's no disturbance, so that the negativities, the craving or whatever, is not creating any disturbance. So it's like the mind is perfectly balanced, and you can, but you're not drowsy. You're bright, and then you can see, and oh, so beautiful. Okay, so that's where this rapture comes from. Don't be afraid when this happens. It's said to be safe. One can come in and out of meditation until eventually you're able to go there when you choose to do so. And the next one is tranquility, and it's described elsewhere as the tranquility of the body and the mind. And so it can be that, like, either the bodily aches and pains disappear and the body just feels relaxed and comfortable, or the mental aches and pains disappear and the mind is able to be comfortable. So you've got this kind of, like, it's the calm happiness, not the excited happiness, not the happiness that's like a monkey reaching for the next thing, or this happened this morning. We had a little meeting this morning, and the Bhikkhunis decided to drive to the Home Depot to buy some bear-proof trash cans because we have a bear at our hermitage. And everybody was like laughing and smiling, and they were so excited and happy because we have so few entertainments in life that going to the Home Depot is the equivalent of a vacation in the Bahamas. And so that's not tranquility. That's just excitement about, having a change of pace or getting away from boredom in order to do something else. So not that kind of happiness, but a deep, profound, stable happiness, and you can stay in that for a long time and you will never be disappointed. You'll never get tired of it. That's the tranquility factor. And then that tranquility, calmness, and stability supports getting into samadhi, which could be translated as immersion or concentration. And that is the deeper meditation where the mind is, you could say, like all of the factors of one's psychology have a one-pointedness directing to wherever the mind is directed in the meditation. Bhanteji compares it to a man-made lake. So it's in a valley, and there are many streams and small streams and large streams and rivers that are flowing into this lake, and the lake is completely filled with water, which is with a dam at one side of it, and then there's an electric generator, and when they allow the water to go through the generator, the water is concentrated, and it's got tremendous power, and that power is able to be harnessed and used for whatever you want to use electricity for. And so just the same way, it's the opposite of the mind being scattered and constantly distracted by this and that, but instead having your everything pulled together into that unity, and that unity, that concentration, then can be directed towards the end of the taints. And that's how it's done. Now, I invite any comments or questions about this. Okay, Maureen? Unmute.
Right. I was going to ask about the abandoning, and presumably you've got to do the abandoning without revulsion. The opposite of the alternative of grasping and that kind of thing. You can't go and be. You've got to do it without revulsion, I imagine.
So be like the dog who was chewing on a bone. I guess the butcher threw a bone out and had a little bit of meat and juice on it, and a little bit of marrow inside, and the dog chews and chews and chews and chews. And so eventually he's gotten all the goodness out of it that he's going to get. And then he just drops the bone and walks away because he's finished with it. Don't need that anymore. But he doesn't hate the bone.
No.
Not repelled. It's not, I want to take that bone and put it in jail or something like that. So it's almost like the revulsion would be happening when there's still a certain amount of attraction left. So if I want to get away from something, but I'm still attracted to it, I may mentally start to see all the unattractive things in that person or that situation in order to be able to get away. So I need the revulsion to break the pull of the gravity of my desire. So it's like a pushing and pulling in two ways. But this abandoning is when, it's just finished. There's no more tension left, no more revulsion left. And it's true. If you're practicing in a way that causes tension or the supporting tension and revulsion, you haven't quite got a hold of it correctly. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
It's because the language is so violent that makes us I think that way, but that strong language is found in the early text.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you.
again?
Are you going to be writing a booklet? Because there's been so much material that's so important to understand. And you've been very clear. I mean, some of the talks were just phenomenal. But there's so much for my poor old brain to really keep so concentrated and focused. And reading the suttas, sometimes it raises so many questions anyway. And I just wondered whether how we were going to follow up on this. Are we only to read that first sutta that you were talking about, the Sava?
I'll tell you what. Since having my 5-month individual retreat, I have shifted my priorities.
Okay.
I'm no longer able to do as much daily administration as I was doing before. And I did actually a lot of writing while I was on retreat and a lot of collecting of things. Unfortunately, it's sort of like a confused mess of this and that. But between the transcribing the talks and referring to the notes which I've collected, I think my friends and I might be able to get it into a pamphlet or an article.
That would be really helpful. But
And if you would write a letter to Dhammadharini, making that like as a strong request, that'll help me to get the time off to
okay.
to do that.
I can do that. Yes. Yes, that would be. I really appreciate this, and I really want to do more of these retreats because I haven't got anything in the area I live in that you know is the way of thinking about things and everything. It's not floofy, it's really grounded, and it's got a scientific basis because I know that you're respectful of that, what those can contribute. So I do appreciate it. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. I think what I'd like to do now is introduce two of the people in the room here are special because they've been serving Dhammadharini as being on the board of the Dhammadharini Support Foundation. I'm going to call on Supatra and invite you to say whatever you would like to say about the Dhammadharini Support Foundation. And after you hear her, then my life is going to become even better because you'll feel so inspired.
Hello, everyone. I serve in the board as a secretary of the board, and I would like to start what I'm going to say by referring back to Ayya Sobhana's new priority that she would like to spend more time on writing, teaching. And in the past, the monastics, and especially Ayya Sobhana, since she is the vice abbess of Dhammadharini, is inundated with the work of running the monastery, which Ayya is referred to as administrative work, but it's a lot more than administration. And the reason that they were inundated is because we don't have enough people helping them. I shouldn't say helping them, I would say contributing to running the beloved monastery so that all these teachings and dissemination of the Buddha's teaching to us can continue, and having the monastics do what the monastics is best at doing, right? And so what I'm trying to say is that there's too few people in the board. We are in need of more people to contribute, to serve. Currently, the ones that taken most of Ayya Sobhana's time is facilities management, which has to do with fixing this and fixing that, repairing this, that's the roof falling apart, and some of the future things like fire abatement. Currently, the big thing is fire abatement, because the monastery is in the fire risky area, so there's a lot of requirement to cut the trees, and all those things combined is a lot of work that's taking a lot of the monastics' time. And we have a position in the board that's called, we give it's a big name, but don't be scared by it. We call it Director of Facilities, but it's basically like facilities management. And if any of you live close enough to the monastery and have some ability to manage projects. I mean, you don't have to be a carpenter or know everything about how to do things, but you are able to oversee some of this. Please do apply. We have the position in our website, and we are really looking for someone who will be able to come and unburden this task from Ayya, Sobhana, and many other monastics that's helping her. And there's currently a few people in the board already, and each of us have our duties, and none of us can really do the facilities either because we don't have the qualification, don't have the time, or we don't live near enough to the Dhammadharini. So that's one position. The second position we are looking for are called community development / communications director. And that means we need someone, you don't have to live near Dhammadharini, but we need someone to help developing local communities in marine counties or nearby, can be Napa, whatever, that can outreach to them, and try to have a relationship in the different group in the communities more than what we do now. We really don't have that particular task designated to anyone. So even though we know people, but it's more isolated and it's individual cases, of which all of this, if we have one person who can harness that and make the effort of whatever our monastery is part of the larger efforts, right, of the entire Bay Area or North Bay. That so we would like someone to do that, and that's a / communication, meaning we have websites, we have social media. The website is well taken care of by a I believe Ayya Seminary Theravada or somebody there. Again, monastics are trying to update the website all the time, which they're doing very well, but we are not really having time to utilize social media to announce a lot of things that we are announcing to you, like this particular work retreat, right? We use whatever we have been using, maybe a few social media sites, but there are more that we can do. If you are good at technology, social media, you don't even have to live in California. Please do apply and help contribute yourself to serve. And I just want to say the last thing is that besides giving back, right? Buddha says that when you service people that are well along the way towards enlightenment, meaning they are progressing into a holy path, the benefits of that to you is tremendous as well. That's including like offering food to them, right? These are all the things that what I just said are what we direly need, and would like to encourage you to ask yourself, what can you do to help? And besides these two leading positions, we have already a few things, positions, such as treasury and fund development, meaning fundraising. We would like to have helpers, and for each of the leaders, right, the helpers become a committee. So the person is not working alone, right? You have a group. So if you have some ability in any area that you think you can contribute, even if you may not have the time or the capacity to want to be the leader, you can apply to be part of the committee and help with the tasks or the pieces that the director can then have a meeting with you and hand it to you to help. I think all of these would be such a tremendous gift to the monastery, and also to the Sangha, to the Buddhist, the growth of Buddhism in at least in California or in the West as well. Thank you, and hopefully see you
Thank you,
contacting
Sobhana.
us. Yes.
So let us have a closing. So, oh, Paula, right. I want to introduce, earlier this morning, we did have, for one of the sessions, we had another person named Bob, but he didn't say anything. He also is serving on the board of the Dhammadharini Support Foundation. And then with us throughout this event, as well as through many of our regular weekly programs, we have Paula Snow, who is the Director of Development for Dhammadharini, serving on the Support Foundation. She's recently taken a job at a retreat center down south, but is continuing to keep her connection with us. Paula, would you like to say a couple of words to us?
Thank you so much, Ayya. Hopefully my internet connection is okay. I just started on the board of directors, director of development. I do this role remotely. I am right now at the top of a mountain in Big Bear, California. So my internet's been in and out. But thank you so much. This weekend has been so rich. And I am absolutely looking for folks to be on the development committee, and that's something that you can do remotely. So if anyone is interested, please do reach out. Like most of you, most likely, I'm so inspired to be of service from the teachings from this weekend and the teachings that we have been enjoying from the Ayyas. So thank you so much, with so much gratitude. And please, if anyone would like to be of service, reach out to me. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Paula. Now, let us direct our awareness to the one who started all of it, our Buddha, our own Sama Sambuddha is here behind us. Pali in English. Araham Sama Sambuddha. Perfectly multiplied blessed one, Buddha, not on me, I run to the Buddha, blessed one. Suakato, the teaching so completely explained by you. Dhamma Supatipanno. The blessed ones, disciples who have practiced well. Thank you all for your friendship, your practice, and your patient listening. You are as much a part of causing this retreat to happen as I am. I couldn't do it without your welcoming ears and your sincere and honest comments. So thank you again, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you, Ayya.
Thank you, Ayya.
Sadhu.
Thank you, Ayya.
Sadhu.
Thank you.
Sadhu.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ayya.
Sadhu, sadhu.